education in this higher sense, if you think of education as producing critical thinkers, then we're far from achieving that. But in any case, you live amidst manifestations of thought. Your wife, your husband is always thinking. Your children are thinking. Your neighbors are thinking. Your colleagues are thinking. And the way they think determines the way they behave. If they think poorly about their marriage, they have a poor marriage. If they think poorly about their investments, they lose money. If they think poorly while they're driving, they may hurt themselves or others. If they think poorly about what the foods they eat, they may affect their health. Thinking controls human behavior. But do we control our thinking? That's the question. Because much of our thinking is the voice of us as a child. Our father in us, our mother in us, the religion we were raised in us, the politics that we inherited from our family, or our peer group, the way our friends think. All of these are subtle pressures to think as other people think. And what is natural to the human mind is to think in such a way as to assume that if you disagree with me, you're wrong. And if you agree with me, you're right, because I am the way and the truth and the light. Egocentrism is natural to the human animal. Homo sapiens, yes, but who is controlling that thinking? Where is that thinking coming from? If you connect this now to the history of critical thought, you'll see that many people spent their life thinking as underlings think, thinking as slaves think, thinking as oppressed people think. And their behavior was often then counter-constructive for their happiness. They may have spent their life doing things that were harmful to themselves, either because they were coerced to do this, or they were taught to do this, or they came to impose these chains upon themselves. Now, look at the frameworks for thinking. I mentioned them. You can get this book, Frameworks for Thinking, and look at 44 models. And realize that there is a challenge then. We must pick amidst the chaos. We must decide what frame of reference we're going to use. And what we have striven to do is to develop a framework which is explicit rather than implicit, which is global rather than specialized, which is systematic rather than episodic, which is Socratic rather than sophistic, which is free as much as we can make it free of constraints, rather than constrained thinking. Many people think, as we say, in a box. And the box can be a very small box. And we can cut off from ourselves many potential experiences because we think in this narrow way. And finally, we have striven to make our model for critical thinking free of jargon. If you look at the glossary of critical thinking terms which we've developed, all of those meanings come from the dictionary. They come from the Oxford English Dictionary. They come from Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary. Critical thinking, a language for talking about thinking, should not be a specialized language. It should be a language that everyone speaks naturally. And we naturally speak, as Gerald pointed out, about our purposes, our goals. We naturally think about our questions, problems, issues in our life. We naturally think about are information-based. Where is our information coming from? And you don't have to be a specialist to know that there's a difference between the data and the interpretation of the data from somebody's point of view. You don't have to be a specialist to know that we have a point of view, and that we should monitor our point of view, and that we should consider alternative points of view. You don't have to be a specialist to know that you don't want your thinking to be unclear, inaccurate, imprecise, irrelevant, superficial, narrow-minded, illogical, trivial, and unfair. Each of those terms speak for themselves. And so we're looking to develop the field of critical thinking based on the analytic vocabulary of the natural languages we speak. No one's jargon should be privileged. Philosophy should not be privileged. Rhetoric should not be privileged. Psychology should not be privileged. Sociology should not be privileged. They're all domains of knowledge. But none of them control critical thinking. None of them invented critical thinking. And many of them, indeed all of them, need critical thinking. And not just need it, but need a lot more of it than presently exists in most fields. Most fields, if you look at the impact they have on majors at the university level, do not obviously open the mind. Very often what they do is train people in a paradigm, the present paradigm, the present way of looking at things. Most fields of study do not do a good job of telling their history and giving us a sense of where they are and where they're not, of what they've considered and what they have not considered.